Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. Thanks for being with us today. We're talking with Jerome DEES. We're talking about government, spending, transparency. So I've interviewed legislatures in my show, and I'll ask about that methane gas money, and nobody knows how much is in there. Who knows? Somebody's got to know. Doesn't someone open the checkbook? I just don't understand how all this money comes in and we don't know where it is or how to direct it to other spots. Some would say it's getting put off into some inappropriate spending in some way.
That would unfortunately be my natural inclination
because we worked in the criminal defense world,
exactly,
and prosecution world,
exactly, yeah. And particularly for a state that is known for earmarking its funds in the budget so heavily. Every dollar is supposed to go to a specific project. To have an amount of funding as great as what I would imagine would be coming from that, just sort of not showing up on the books, having so many people who should be in the know, sort of left in the dark as to that, is particularly troubling. Scary. It is.
So the lottery, shifting gears off of that, the lottery, you think it's got a chance?
I honestly think that it does.
I know Walt Maddox is for it. I don't know where Kay Ivey stands on that. Sue Bell Cobb, who's a candidate for governor, I'm not sure where she stands on. I think she's for it too.
She is for it, yes.
It's particularly in light of how it affects education.
Correct. So I've actually, because of the experience that I mentioned that I had as an undergraduate student down in Florida, as well as doing some research on the Hope Scholarship that Georgia has, I've actually been in talks with a couple of the gubernatorial campaigns about what their ideas were for the education lottery moving forward. And so I've been able to talk with people from both Walt's campaign as well as Judge Sue Bell's campaign as well on the things that worked in those states and the things that didn't. And so I think having that sort of on-the-ground practical policy experience is incredibly important to have in a legislator going down. Particularly during this season where I think it really does have some legs. To give you an example of why I believe there's actually a good possibility of seeing this move forward. As I stated, I lived in Montgomery during the time of Don Siegelman when he was governor, and attended a predominantly white conservative church that was a part of that big movement that pushed to kill any sort of lottery amendment legislation in the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm still friends with a lot of those people today, and the conversations that I have with them now versus then are markedly different. There's been a real sea change in the state of Alabama as relates specifically to funding going towards education, because I believe we're at a point now where we all understand that our schools are woefully underfunded, and that funding has got to come from somewhere. Now, I'm open to any sort of alternative ideas, but it's been, 15, 16 years now at this point, and nobody's been able to pinpoint where else that funding would come from. And I think they realize that as well.
You talked about civil asset forfeiture. What people don't understand is law enforcement, if they arrest you and it's thought upon arrest that whatever you're carrying, whether it be cash or usually cash, is the proceeds of an illegal activity. They take the money first, whether you're convicted or not.
Correct.
Of the underlying offense. I know you've been working toward reversing that, where, listen, until somebody's convicted, we shouldn't be taking their assets, because there is a presumption of innocence that goes with each individual charged with crime. Isn't that the underlying basis for trying to change that legislation?
Yes. So just to kind of clarify, when I was with the DA's office, that was actually one of the areas that I worked in, both in Birmingham, and then I had actually a brief stint as the chief asset forfeiture prosecutor in the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. And so I've had the opportunity to work in that issue on both sides of the criminal justice spectrum. And with what we're trying to do on civil asset forfeiture is essentially get rid of the civil aspect. And so one thing that people may not know is that obviously there's the criminal activity that goes on, but the forfeiture proceeding itself proceeds in a completely different courtroom, completely different court setting in civil court. What we would like to see is all of that handled within the context of the criminal court setting. And so you would go through your typical criminal proceeding for possession of a drug charge or whatever, but that proceeding on whatever was seized, whether it's money, the car, or whatever, does not take place until after the state is able to prove via a conviction.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
In a criminal form.
Exactly. And so that still allows law enforcement the opportunity to seize through proper Fourth Amendment procedures what they believe is illegally gotten gains, and still ultimately forfeit that property if the proper channels are followed through and proven.
Just talking about some due process.
Exactly.
Good old constitutional law.
Exactly.
It's
and
still
so
working.
it still allows for law enforcement to do what it needs to do to combat crime and things of that nature. But importantly, it ensures safeguards for citizens to make sure that nothing untoward is
Process
being
is not abused.
Exactly.
We're out of time. I've got more things I want to talk about, but I'm going to have him back. So I'm going to wish you well in your election, and I will invite you back if all goes well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being with us today. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll see you next week.